Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're looking at Tata Investment Corporation's Q2 FY25 results. They've had quite the quarter, so let's get into it.
And for those maybe not familiar with Tata Investment Corporation, they're a really big deal in India. Classified as a middle layer, NBFC, by the Reserve Bank of India,
MBFC meaning.
a non-banking financial company.
So they're a financial institution,
Yeah,
but...
not a traditional bank,
Right.
but they play a big role in the financial system, especially when it comes to investments.
Which this quarter really paid off for them. Their profits are up huge GE.
And that's no exaggeration.
On a standalone basis, they hit 100.23 crores,
Which is impressive on its own, but then you look at the consolidating...
including all their subsidiaries and everything.
Exactly, and that number is even bigger, 123.69 crores.
That's a serious jump compared to last year, too. We're talking major year-over-year growth.
Which is always a good sign if you're an investor.
Absolutely. So let's dig into the why. What's fueling this growth?
Well, a couple of things. First, their dividend income has been a real powerhouse.
Those dividends adding up.
And then we've got gains from their investment portfolio. They've made some smart moves.
So let's break it down, starting with those dividends.
For Q2 FY25, the standalone dividend income was 124.26 crores.
Wow.
And the consolidated euro 102.14 crores?
I mean, that right there tells you they're holding on to some solid investments.
Ones that are generating consistent returns over time, which is a big part of their strategy.
Long-term thinking for the win. A good lesson for all of us.
And it's not just about holding on. It's about the scale and the quality of those investments to generate that much income.
Right. Now they've got other revenue streams too, like their interest income.
That was steady this quarter, 9.06 crores standalone and 9.14 crores consolidated.
Steady Eddie. That's their income from things like bonds, right?
Bonds, fixed income securities, that sort of thing.
More predictable than the stock market roller coaster.
It's a good foundation for their earnings.
Like a bedrock you can rely on.
Now then there's the net gain on fair value changes. This is where it gets interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
So standalone, that's 18.5 years. Consolidated a whopping 74.70 crores.
All right, so break down fair value changes for us.
Basically, it means some of their investments increased in value, and they decided to sell.
So they're not just passively holding that Tata, they're actively managing that portfolio.
Buying and selling at the right time, like a chess game.
Making those power moves.
And the fact that those gains are so big shows they're doing it well.
So smart decisions all around. But what about expenses? Have those been rising too?
They have. Total expenses are up.
Oh.
But Bauti, even with that, increased their profit before taxes soared.
Okay, so they're keeping those costs under control while making smart investments that pay off.
That's exactly it.
Like a balancing act.
You got to spend money to make money, but you got to do it wisely.
Now let's talk about specifics. They had some really impressive gains from selling off some equity investments.
On a standalone basis, 235.31 crores and consolidated 306.24 crores.
That's not chump change. What does that tell us?
It reinforces their active management approach. They're not afraid to take profits when the time is right.
Cashing in on those wins.
And that's a big part of what makes them such a successful investment company.
Now, the big question for a lot of folks listening is, did they announce any dividends for Q2?
That's the one everyone wants to know.
Did they share the wealth?
Well, the report doesn't say anything about dividend announcements for this particular quarter.
Interesting. So no dividend news. Is that good, bad, or just neutral?
I wouldn't read too much into it. There are lots of reasons they might not announce a dividend right now.
Such as?
Well, maybe they're reinvesting those profits for even bigger growth down the line. Or maybe we're building up cash for a strategic acquisition.
So playing the long game, it's not always about instant gratification.
Exactly. Sometimes delaying gratification leads to a bigger payoff later on.
And that's where understanding their overall strategy comes in.
Right. It's about more than just looking at one quarter's numbers. It's about the big picture.
Exactly. So stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into Tata investment. We'll be back with more analysis and insights.
All right, so we've looked at the numbers, but let's zoom out a bit.
Get the bigger picture.
Exactly. No company operates in a vacuum. So how do those bigger economic factors play into this?
What kind of economic weather has Tata investment been dealing with?
Well, the report doesn't mention anything super specific, but it does say that the overall economic environment has been good for them.
So they've had some tailwinds pushing them along.
But, those winds can shift. So what are some of the risks out there for investors to keep in mind?
Yeah, what could rock the boat?
Well, one of the biggest risks for any investment company is always market volatility.
Ah, the ups and downs of the market.
Exactly. We're
Yep.
talking stock prices, interest rates, currency exchange rates. All that can impact Tata Investments
And
portfolio.
ultimately their earnings.
Right. So it's not just a buy it and forget it
Yes.
situation.
Yeah, stay informed.
Absolutely. Another thing to consider is competition.
Oh, yeah. They're not the only players in the game.
There are a lot of other companies out there trying to get a piece of that investment pie.
So Tata Investment has to stay sharp,
Keep innovating. Find new ways to stand out.
like a constant race,
And then there's always the regulatory landscape.
especially in finance. There are a lot of rules
And those rules can change, which can create hurdles.
or opportunities.
Exactly. It all depends on how Tata Investment adapts to those changes.
So we've got market volatility, competition, and regulations. What else?
Geopolitical risks.
Ah, yes. The state of the world.
Things like international conflicts, political instability, that can all have an impact.
It's a reminder that we can't control everything.
Even the best investors can get caught off guard.
True. But speaking of good investors, what's your take on Tata Investment's performance compared to their competitors?
Well, the report doesn't give us a direct comparison, but we can look at industry trends.
See how they measure up.
And from what I see, Tata Investment is holding their own.
Even outperforming some of their peers in some areas.
So they're not just keeping up. They're setting the pace in some ways.
That's impressive. So what would you say are their biggest strengths?
Their investment management expertise is top-notch.
They've got a good team,
A team with a track record of making smart decisions.
and they're not afraid to take calculated risks.
Like we saw with selling off those equity investments.
Bold moves.
Another strength is their focus on long-term value.
Not just chasing quick profits,
They're building a sustainable business.
which is what investors want to see.
And they're really good at managing risk,
Being responsible with their investments.
not taking unnecessary gambles.
That's reassuring. But no company is perfect. So what are some areas where Tata Investment could improve?
Well, I think they could be a bit more transparent.
About what?
Their investment decisions, their thought process behind those choices.
Show their work a bit more?
It would give investors more confidence.
That makes sense. What else?
I'd also keep an eye on their exposure to certain sectors or regions.
Making sure they're not too concentrated in one area.
Diversification is key for managing risk.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Now, this isn't specific to Tata Investment, but the evolving regulatory landscape is always a challenge.
The rules of the game keep changing.
And keeping up can be tough for any company.
It's a moving target.
But so far, Tata Investment has shown they can adapt.
They're flexible.
All right, so we've talked about the external factors, but what about internally? Did they make any big changes this quarter? New initiatives, new policies?
Anything that might have impacted their performance.
The report doesn't highlight any major strategic shifts,
So no big shakeups.
but they do emphasize their commitment to risk management and diversification.
Sticking with what works.
Those are their core principles.
The foundation of their success.
And that consistency is attractive to investors.
It creates a sense of stability.
All right, so let's bring it back to the shareholders.
Yeah.
What do these results mean for them?
Bottom line time,
Well, strong financial results usually mean a higher stock price.
which is good news if you already own some Tata Investment shares.
But what about potential investors? Is it a good time to buy?
Tough question.
It depends on each individual's situation.
Their goals, their risk tolerance,
But Tata Investments' performance definitely makes them worth considering.
they're on the radar.
Now, besides the stock price, these results could also impact future dividends.
Even though there weren't any announced this quarter,
Their strong financials suggest they could increase those payouts down the road.
which is good news for income-seeking investors.
Dividends can provide a nice, steady stream of passive income.
Okay, so we've talked big picture. We've talked competition. We've talked risks. But to really understand how Tata Investment is doing, we need to go deeper.
Look under the hood.
Exactly. Let's dive into their financial statements.
Starting with the statement of assets and liabilities.
The financial selfie.
What do they own? What do they owe?
So what's this selfie telling us?
Well, one thing that stands out is their big investment in equities.
Okay.
Over 40,000 crores as of September 30th.
So a big chunk of their portfolio is in the stock market.
Which can be risky, but also has the potential for big rewards.
High risk, high reward.
And it's not all stocks. They've also got a lot invested in bonds and debentures.
For that steady income.
More stability, less volatility.
Good balance.
Mm.
Now what about the liabilities side? What do they owe?
They have a relatively low debt level.
That's a good sign.
It means they're not overly reliant on borrowed money.
More financial freedom.
Now let's look at the statement of cash flows. This shows us the movement of money.
Where's the cash going?
Their cash flow from operations is strong.
Meaning?
They generated over 248 crores in cash just from their core business activities in the first half of the fiscal year.
So their investments are generating real cash.
They're not just numbers on a page.
That's a good sign. And it gives them more flexibility to grow and maybe even pay out more dividends.
And the statement of cash flows also shows us their active investment strategy,
Buying and selling.
constantly optimizing that portfolio.
Now, what about the consolidated statements? How does that all look?
It basically mirrors their standalone performance.
So the subsidiaries are doing well, too.
They're contributing to the overall success.
That's what you want to see. Now we could go even deeper into the footnotes and all the details,
Those footnotes are like the fine print.
where the real juicy details are hidden.
We could see exactly which companies they're getting dividends from.
How those amounts have changed over time. But for now, let's stick to the main points.
Okay, so we've analyzed the numbers, but what about management? What's their take on all this?
Well, the report includes some commentary from Tata Investments leadership.
What are they saying?
They're cautiously optimistic.
Meaning?
They're confident in their long-term growth, but they also acknowledge the risks out there.
Like market volatility and those regulatory changes we talked about?
Exactly.
They're being realistic.
Which is good. You don't want them to sugarcoat things.
Transparency is important.
So it sounds like they're feeling good about the future, but they're also prepared for whatever challenges come their way.
Exactly. Now, remember we talked about the broader economic context earlier.
Right. How's the global and domestic economy playing into all this?
Well, the report says that the overall economic environment has been pretty favorable for Tata Investment.
So they're benefiting from those positive trends.
But, as we said, things can change quickly.
Always be prepared.
Now, what about strategic initiatives? Any big changes this quarter?
Did they shake things up?
Not really. The report emphasizes their ongoing focus on risk management and diversification.
Sticking to the fundamentals.
These are the core principles that have driven their success.
And they're not about to abandon them now.
Exactly. Now, what about external factors, like those regulatory changes we talked about?
Did any of those impact Tata Investment this quarter?
Well, the financial sector is heavily regulated, so any changes can have an impact.
It's a constantly evolving landscape.
The report doesn't mention any specific changes that had a major effect this quarter.
So no big surprises there.
But they do say they're keeping a close eye on the regulatory environment.
Always on their toes.
Now let's talk about what all this means for investors, both current and potential ones.
What's the takeaway?
Tata Investment has a lot going for it. They've got a strong track record, consistent dividends, and a long-term focus,
But there are also risks,
like market volatility, competition, and regulatory changes.
things to keep in mind.
Market volatility is always a factor. Stock prices go up, stock prices go down,
You gotta be ready for the ride.
and competition is fierce.
Lots of companies fighting for the same investors.
Tata Investment needs to keep innovating to stay ahead.
And those regulations, always changing.
You never know when the rules of the game might shift.
It's a challenge, but it's also what makes investing so interesting.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Let's recap the key takeaways.
Tata Investment had a fantastic Q2,
Their investments are paying off.
and they're sharing those profits with shareholders through dividends.
But past performance is no guarantee of future success.
There are always risks to consider.
But Tata Investment seems to be well positioned for the future.
One final thought for our listeners.
Go ahead.
Remember, knowledge is power.
Keep learning, keep asking questions.
And stay curious about the world of finance. You know, it's interesting. Tata Investment, they're this big investment company, but they're also an NBFC.
Yeah, that's right. A non-banking financial company.
So they're kind of walking this line between two worlds.
Like a hybrid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how does that impact their strategy? What does it mean for investors?
Yeah, it's a unique position.
As an NBFC, especially a middle layer one, they're subject to a lot of regulations,
So they're under the watchful eye of the Reserve Bank of India.
which can be a good thing. It provides a level of oversight and stability.
Investors like to see that.
But they also have a lot of flexibility as an investment company
They can move quickly, seize opportunities.
to make those strategic decisions.
It's a balance.
The stability of an NBFC with the agility of an investment company?
Seems to be working for them.
Yeah.
Now, something else to think about, geopolitical risks.
Ah, yes. The big wild card.
We didn't really see it mentioned in the reports, but it's always lurking in the background,
And it can have a huge impact.
especially for a company like Tata Investment. with investments all over the world.
Global events, political tensions, those can all send shockwaves through the financial markets.
And Tata investment isn't immune.
Currency exchange rates, commodity prices, investor sentiment, it can all be affected.
It's a reminder that there are some things you just can't control.
No matter how good your strategy is.
So diversification is key.
And risk management.
Got to be prepared for anything.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
Tata Investments financials, the economic landscape, geopolitical risks.
It's been quite a journey.
But let's zoom out one last time and give our listeners the key takeaways.
The big picture.
So what should they remember about Tata Investments Q2 FY25 performance?
First and foremost, they had a phenomenal quarter.
Stellar results.
Those strategic investment decisions really paid off.
Especially selling off those equity investments?
And their dividend income shows they're committed to rewarding their shareholders.
It's a win-win.
Now remember, past performance is not a guarantee of future success.
It's not a crystal ball.
But Tata Investment has shown they have the experience and the strategy to succeed.
And that's what matters.
Any last words of wisdom?
Yeah, for all the investors out there, keep learning, stay curious, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
That's the best advice anyone can give.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Tata Investment Corporation Ltd's Q2 FY25 results.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, happy investing.